Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faisal and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, since the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, innocent people in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are under prolonged lockdown, having complete communication blackout, shackles of worst military siege, public assembly banned, press silenced, and Kashmiri leaders incarcerated, including pro-Delhi politicians. India committing worst human rights violations, Indian brutal occupation forces conducting fake encounters, arrested and tortured thousands of young Kashmiris, committing war crimes and genocide, snatching Kashmiri identity, issued millions of fake domiciles to non-Kashmiris, swiftly changing the demographics of the occupied territory in complete violation of international law and United Nations Security Council resolutions. Beside fake delimitations to hold staged elections in occupied territory, a strange and suspicious move started by Modi regime by bringing more companies of Central Police Reserve Force, CRPF, setting up a battalion headquarters in Baramulla, special police deployed to target and terrorize locals, additional troops sent to Valley, and coincidentally appointed an Indian army chief, a newly appointed army chief, having background of triggering war crimes and false flag operations in the occupied territory. These are the horrible facts which are right now there in the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and people are in shackles. To discuss this, the grave situation right now in the occupied territory, we have in our studios Shaikh Abdul Majid. He is the member of All Parties Hurriyat Conference. Most welcome to you, Shaikh Sahab. Thank you very much for your presence. And we have with him Dr. Awais bin Wasi. He is the Indian affairs expert. Most welcome to you, Dr. Sahab. Thank you very much for your time as well.
Welcome.
And online joining us, Dr. Waseem Ishaque. He is the senior analyst. Most welcome to you, Dr. Waseem. Thank you very much for joining us online.
Thank you.
My first question to you, Shaikh Sahab, that why, despite of tall and fake claims of peace and normalcy, Modi is so scared of innocent Kashmiris, as during his recent visit, entire Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir had been declared the red zone and curfew imposed with heavy military and paramilitary deployment.
First of all, I am highly grateful for providing an opportunity to have my viewpoint on the important topic that the people of Jammu and Kashmir are facing since 1947 in general, but particularly after the abrogation move that took place on 5 August 2019. If you see, I think that was the worst ever decision by any Indian government against the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Kashmiris are right now living in an open prison.
Now, obviously, the deployment of the heavy forces, even though there were only already having
now more than a million.
It was there only more than million, and a month ago they deployed further 75,000 forces in Jammu and Kashmir. On one side, the Indian government is beating the drum that everything is all is well there in Jammu and Kashmir. If all is well there, then why they are increasing forces in Jammu and Kashmir?
Actually, every Indian government in general and this Modi regime in particular has the dual face, because one face is for the international community and the other face is internal, and that's why might be they are trying to show some sort of a normalcy. Your point well taken, Dr. Awais, Indian mimicry of Israeli settlers policy and demographic changes involved new domicile rules and subsequently issuance of millions of domiciles and voting rights to the non-Kashmiris and outsiders. So, means Modi swiftly changing the demographics and intends to show the world that occupied Kashmir is actually a Hindu majority region. Your thoughts?
Yes, you are very much right that India has started mimicking Israeli style of demographic engineering, which it did to eradicate or eliminate or exterminate Palestinian population from their own land. They got disenfranchised, they got dispossessed from their land, and they have same tactic or same strategy that they have borrowed, and they borrowed after 7 decades, after over 7 decades, when they made every possible efforts to subdue and suppress the massive uprising of the people of Jammu and Kashmir and their sentiment. When they were unable, the state administrations or Delhi administrations, they were unable to suppress the freedom struggle and diffuse their sentiments. So ultimately they borrowed that engineering, that Israeli strategy to do that, and in order to do that was there in the BJP's agenda, and in the second tenure that they ultimately in 5th of August they did it. And the primary reason, if you see all these things, domicile certification and then delimitation and land acts and other things, if you take all these things together, so this is quite obvious that what are their intents, what are their purposes, and the purpose is basically to bring about the demographic change in the valley, so that if in future plebiscite or referendum is going to be held, they think that they could have the favorable results as a result of that.
Definitely, your point well taken. So how do you see, you have just mentioned about the delimitation. So how do you see the so-called Indian Delimitation Commission's plan for 90-member puppet assembly in occupied territory? As during the recent visit of Narendra Modi, he announced that he is going to conduct elections and restoration of so-called statehood. So while Indian Election Commission is going to publish some sort of electoral roll in August 20 this year, so how do you see such, because all parties Hurriyat Conference and all other freedom movement leaders, they are actually opposing it and they have rejected these plans. So how do you see overall situation and this announcement?
This whole plan, this abrogation of 370 and 35A, it was taken with a unfortunately pernicious intent and pernicious move, and that move, as already I stated, to bring about the demographic change. And what, in order to install the Hindu chief minister in the J&K assembly, what they did is that earlier the composition was such that it was not possible, because in Jammu the total number of seats were 37, and in Valley the population was I think 70 lakh, and the seats reserved for allocated for that, they were 46. So what happened, if you see the discrepancy and if you see the machinations of India, that where there is population of 70 lakh, only one seat is increased, 46 to 47,
and 6 to Jammu.
And 6 to Jammu. So I think that with this intent, Jammu is part of the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir. There is no objection of that. But if we see the Delhi mechanism, they in fact try to, by bringing and by raising the number of seats in Jammu, they try to install a Hindu chief minister, and whatever moves and initiatives that they have taken during the last decade, they wanted to give legitimacy to that, okay? Because the current administration, that practically there is no administration, bureaucrats and lieutenant governor from Delhi, they are ruling, from the center. So in fact,
most of them are either puppet or imported.
So if you see the constituencies which have been redrawn or which have been drawn, you see that some of the constituency, for example, Padar constituency, that constituency has been carved out where, the population was quite less. On the contrary, there are large number of areas, in which, because that was the Muslim majority area, so that constituencies have not been carved so that Muslims could not reap the benefit of that.
Yes, definitely. Your point well taken. Dr. Waseem, do you think that behind Indian Supreme Court's injustice and in the garb of conducting polls in occupied region by September 30th, 2024 through December 2023 draconian verdict of upholding abrogation of Article 370 as constitutional. BJP and the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh regime actually intends to endorse and legitimize its 2019 brutal actions.
Faisal, thank you very much. This is a very important discussion which we are doing today, but we have to see this in two aspects. One, that Indian Supreme Court has to take all those decisions which are in the supreme national interest of India. So therefore, as an analyst, I am not really surprised by what the Indian Supreme Court has given about the verdict about the abrogation of Article 370 and also whatever the polls they are conducting in Jammu and Kashmir. But what we have seen on ground, that majority of the people in Jammu and Kashmir are absolutely discontent with whatever has happened in last few years. However, we have to also see that why Prime Minister Modi is embarked upon this mission, upon this ambitious plan. From my perspective, last 2.5 decades, we have seen the rising graph of Indian international acceptance, whereby Prime Minister Modi has been actually groomed to take the leadership role in this region. Starting from US-India strategic partnership, today how we look at the India and great power relationship, we should be really surprised the way its graph has gone up. Its acceptance with the United States, with Russia, with China, with EU and with the Gulf countries. That has actually given a lot of leverage to Indian Prime Minister Modi to actually go on this ambitious plan, and during this third term, which he has suffered a lot of setbacks, must finish the agenda of grabbing the entire Kashmir. While the China, who is also another party to this conflict, has not accepted and outrightly rejected the Indian plans and claims. However, diplomatically, Pakistan and China now need to actually coordinate their efforts and use the good offices of UN Security Council and also all the regional forums like the ASEAN, the SCO, the BRICS, and wherever we can, and must highlight the Indian brutalities and plans of Prime Minister Modi to grab the entire Kashmir. So the fake elections are actually to give the legitimacy to Indian designs. However, there is yet another opportunity which Prime Minister Modi wants to actually cash on in a limited time frame. That is the situation in Gaza and how the Israel's brutalities have unfolded in Gaza. So the same thing they want to actually replicate and gain whatever maximum. The deployment of so many Indian troops, and I would say enhanced deployment, is actually aimed at grabbing maximum land, giving it a political cover, giving it a false impression of normalcy, and also then changing it, the entire outlook of Kashmir region, through a very much political alternate system, which Prime Minister Modi is going to embark through fake elections. So this is the scenario where we are today, and I think whatever they are doing is highly unacceptable for Pakistan, being the main party to this dispute. And we
definitely, you are absolutely right. It is clearly unacceptable to Pakistan and never be. Shaikh sir, whether that was not a shame for Delhi, as they got as strong evidence by the election of abrogation opponent Abdul Rashid Shaikh from Baramulla, as he won from jail with the slogan jail ka badla vote se lenge, voting will avenge the jailing actually. So defeated former puppet Chief Minister Umar Abdullah. So when no BJP candidate was there, so why they are not actually learning the lessons out of that defeats, and how much hatred there in Kashmiris, and Kashmiris only want freedom from India?
Actually, the policy of the Indian government, particularly the Modi, he has issued always autocratic orders and implementation of those orders with immediate effect. But actually the elections, if the engineer Abdul Rashid Shaikh, who won with the highest margin, defeated ex-Chief Minister Umar Abdullah, basically India is not respecting the vote They are not respecting the people of Jammu and Kashmir. If they have respected the decision of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, then they should have not highly regard the elections of 1987 and cornered the people of Jammu and Kashmir and were forced to take arms. Now the Modi regime, he is going to conduct, they are planning to conduct elections in coming September. This does not mean that Kashmiris will accept it. As you mentioned, the demographic changes, the domicile changes, some 40,000 non-Kashmiris were provided domiciles. And obviously they are eligible for votes there.
Sheikh Sahib, now the number is beyond lakhs, I think so that
40 lakhs.
Yes,
Approximately
definitely.
40 lakhs.
It's about millions. It's not about thousands. So it is unfortunate that whatever is happening. But Dr. Awais, do you not think that in line with Israeli tactics, as we were already discussing, that Modi regime forcefully employed the economic blockade to force entire population in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to live below the poverty line and hunger, as unemployment and food shortage is actually risen to a very alarming level?
Yes, you're right. There was a recent survey I came across in which all the states of India, they have been mapped economically. And though Jammu and Kashmir is not the state of India, but the data was shared. And in that 21 point some percent was the unemployment ratio. That was the highest throughout India. Okay. So if you compare the slogans, if you compare the promises which Prime Minister Modi made, that after revocation of Article 370, everything would be fine. There will be economic prosperity, there will be economic development. And he wanted to sell this argument within India that this revocation of 370 is basically the bottleneck. That is basically the obstacle to bring prosperity and development in Jammu and Kashmir. But if we see the situation on the ground, the situation is quite unfortunate, and the situation is quite contrary because the local industry has been destroyed. If you see the apple industry, if you see other, craft industry, local industry that was originally run by the Kashmiris,
orchards, cottage industry, markets, everything destroyed by
everything
Indians.
got destroyed, got dismantled. So I think that this is the facade that Modi tried to project and tried to sell across India and internationally also, that we are doing it for bringing prosperity and economic development. This situation on the ground is quite contrary, and there are a lot of reports, there are a lot of studies which testify to this fact that there is no economic development, rather the other way around is happening.
Yes, definitely. Your point well taken. So, when we are talking about some horrible reports that suggest actually, Sheikh Sahib, that following the footsteps of the butcher Israel, India intensified its state-sponsored terrorism, at least killed more than 33 innocents just in last 6 months, and more than that, allotting more lands to its non-Kashmiri Hindus, particularly, especially its occupation forces and Indian industrialists, to change not only change the identity but also the demography of the Kashmir. How do you respond to this one?
I would like to add a few words regarding the economy of the Jammu and Kashmir. Brother pointed out that the apple industry that was completely destroyed, under the plan of Indian government, that actually the apple industry is the backbone of the Kashmir economy. We have 20 metric ton production of apple, and that cost is approximately some 8,000 crore. And unfortunately, out of that, only 1% was managed to sell out. That means the people of Kashmiris, the people who are related to the fruit industry, they face 7,000 crore of loss.
Definitely.
This, unfortunately, this all is according to the plan. On one side, Indian government is destroying the economy of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. On the other side, he is providing domicile to the Indian citizens. This is the same plan as Israel has practiced in Palestine. That they bought their land either at low cost or at high cost. When Kashmiri, the economic decline will be there among Kashmiris. On the other hand, the Indians will come and they will buy their land even though at the highest cost. That means the Indian government is going to capture everything. As you mentioned, that 53 canals of land was provided to CRPF.
Yes.
And on the other hand, in the Badgam district, that Maharashtra Bhavan was provided to them. They are gradually capturing the land of Jammu and Kashmir and making them the Kashmiris paralyzed.
Yeah, definitely. Your point well taken and well elaborated. Dr. Waseem, as Shaikh Sahab is saying, what it means when India deployed an additional 70 companies of the Central Reserve Police Force in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, while allotted 53 canal land to establish a new battalion headquarter of the CRPF in Baramulla districts, and lots of other installations in different districts of the occupied territory.
Faisal, if we see the track record of India in last 3 decades, especially starting from 1991, they have actually tried to suppress the freedom struggle by way of huge deployment of military, regular and the paramilitary forces. And they have incurred losses of more than 100,000 Kashmiris, innocent Kashmiris, killed during last 3 decades, even more than that, but this is what is on record. But they have not been able to control the situation. The India also employed a tactics of, in international relations, we say salami slice, gradually moving and removing people from their lands. So the way they have brought in the demographic changes, the way they have made certain political adjustments and the constitutional adjustments, what we see on ground today from the realist perspective, they have miserably failed. So the only option now available to India is grabbing by force. If they have been so successful in last 3 decades, the fake show of normalcy, it has actually not been accepted by the international community. And it has not been accepted even by the Indians themselves. So the only option is now to deploy more forces. And as they deploy more forces, they would grab more land. And in the process, they would bring more Hindus from other parts and get them settled here. So actually, they are now trying to do 2 functions, suppressing the freedom struggle and providing protection to the newly shifted Hindus who have bought lands or houses over here. So from their perspective, they want to achieve 2 aims, demographic shift and also the control of freedom struggle. So this is their wishful thinking. In my humble analysis, both have not succeeded so far despite suppression of last 3 decades. And this is not going to succeed even in future. But let me re-emphasize again, Pakistan is a major party to this conflict. Pakistan should not just sit idle and see and watch and see what is happening. We have to initiate a strong process of proactive diplomatic engagement at all levels. We have to provide moral support to our Kashmiri brothers at all costs, at all forums. And we don't have to be actually.
Definitely.
We don't have to.
Right. Dr. Awais, how do you see Bharatiya Janata Party, especially Modi, after assuming its 3rd term, a recent deployment of the new force of 960 highly trained policemen to target and terrorize the pro-freedom people of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, especially in villages along the line of control?
You know, most of this deployment occurred in Jammu region, and they are saying that this deployment has been taken place in the context of the recent violent incidents. But I think that we need to look back and see that this village defense committees and village defense guards, weapons have been distributed to them. And in 2023,
very notorious.
And in 2023, I think the number is extremely high.
These are actually the killing squads.
Killing squad, yes, killing squad, and they have been, provided this, massive weapons to those people. So I think that now those weapons are in the hands of those people that who are doing this thing. Okay?
Obviously, yes.
And with this, this kind of weapon, I think that they are being used. And this additional deployment, I think that as earlier discussed by Sheikh Saab, so I reiterate the same, that if India says that there is normalcy, India held some G20 summit, India internationally tried to project that there is hunky-dory in Jammu and Kashmir. So what is the point? Already almost 1 million forces, paramilitary forces have been deployed, then additional forces have been deployed in the before the abrogation of 370, and now the recent development that you have mentioned. So all these things, it belies the claim of normalcy. It belies the claim of that everything is fine, everything is okay in Jammu and Kashmir. So it clearly indicates that the situation on the ground is not controlled. There is a potential, massive uprising.
Yes,
which could
definitely.
erupt at any time, and it happened in the past also.
And the kind of atrocities, genocide and war crimes going on over there, it means that every Kashmiri has every right to pick arms and have an armed struggle, because ultimately, because if you are just enforcing them, they are not protected anywhere. Every inch of Kashmir is now is just a killing valley. So, what the Kashmiris do on that? So, Sheikh Saab, have you noticed a strange move by Indian Modi regime in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, as Bharatiya Janata Party installed a puppet administration, withdrawn the security cover of so-called VVIPs, 57 I think so. Is it by design to fulfill its nefarious designs to stage some fake murder attempts or the killing or terrorism, and just put the blame on some of the freedom movement leaders or freedom fighters?
There is no doubt. India is working on the policy, and there are several evidences that security forces deployed in Jammu and Kashmir have articulated fake encounters, and all after that they blamed particularly Pakistan. Whenever they have any failure there in Jammu and Kashmir, then they are blaming Pakistan so that they can defend on international level at a diplomatic level. Unfortunately, actually, this all, what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir, what India is doing in Jammu and Kashmir, Kashmiris have not faced this all first time. They are suffering, they are in threat since 1947. But the Kashmiris have decided that they will turn every stone for their rights. Unfortunately, if you see the genocide, what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir, the whole world is looking this all by open eyes. But unfortunately, they are handicapped by limbs. But we Kashmiris, we are not handicapped.
We already watched that during the 8 to 9 months how the world failed in Palestine. So this, a simple thing is, the world might not be interested in anything because they have the economic chunk in the Indian market. But the thing is that we have to, as Dr. Waseem was saying. So Dr. Waseem, what do you think about those 550 ASMI submachine guns ordered by the Indian occupation forces to increase killing spree in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir? These submachine guns will be delivered to the Parachute Regiment Special Forces in Northern Command, which is actually there in the occupied territory, by 28 September this year.
Unfortunately, Faisal, we see what was happening in West Bank, how the Israeli government had armed the locals with special weapons and the small arms weapons to kill the Palestinians. So the same sort of format in little bit alterations is being applied by Prime Minister Modi over here in Kashmir. All these weapon systems which have been issued is just a license to kill as many Kashmiris as they can through fake encounters or through some fake sort of claims that they are killing the terrorists. But this is not a new tactic. They have been employed this since 1991. And despite that they have killed over 100,000 innocent Kashmiris, The freedom struggle has not died down. The spirit of Kashmiris has not died down. And the Kashmiris are actually adamant that they would go for self-determination. Since last 75 years, they have proved. And I'm sure, inshallah, that with the efforts of all of us together, our moral support and our material support, in terms of using all the channels, diplomatic channels at the regional level and at the international level, we will support our Kashmiri brothers. We will not let them alone. So all
Definitely,
these fake
definitely.
encounters and
We are
fake
here and we are
meetings,
there.
etc., all these is going to fail as it has failed in last 75 years, and especially as it has already failed in last two tenures of Prime Minister Modi. So now we are at the crossroads. Prime Minister Modi is trying to create a situation of, God forbid, a civil war in Kashmir. That's why they are arming the people and giving them license to kill. But the Kashmiris are resilient and determined, and I'm sure they know how to defend themselves. And Prime Minister Modi's this third tenure would also prove to be a fatal error for him, as it has been happening in the past. So we need not to be worried.
Dr.
but we
Waseem,
need to
as you were just mentioning about that, might be as they are bringing in lots of non-Kashmiris, issuing them domiciles, giving them voting rights, and ruining the whole of the economy of the Kashmiris, giving them hunger and economic downturn and all that. So in that whole perspective, the fears of the civil war or something like that, whatever design of the BJP is it just a coincidence or Bharatiya Janata Party regime and Modi has some premeditated design that newly appointed Indian Army Chief General Upendra Dwivedi was commissioned in a regiment of Jammu and Kashmir Rifles in 1984, first Indian officer to raise from this regiment, and served in occupied territory as General Officer commanding Northern Command from 2022 to 2024. Do you think that is it just a coincidence or it's a premeditated plan of the Modi government?
Faisal, from my analysis, it could be both. Because one, that since the Kashmir is now right on the preference agenda of Prime Minister Modi to do it during his tenure, this third tenure, and I'm sure in his analysis, he's very sure that he's not going to get another term, because this time also the fight was very tough. So maybe by design or maybe by default, he has now appointed the army chief who is very much familiar with the Kashmiri region, with its terrain, with its demographic configuration and everything. So therefore, he might use it as a leverage to speed up the process of land grabbing, and also the completing the process of the political reconstitution of the region of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is what he has been trying in the past. So through these instruments, he may try to hasten up the process. But the time would tell that he is not going to succeed, because he is actually facing the resilient Kashmiris who have fought for the liberation, for their freedom since last 75 years, despite huge losses, despite tortures, and despite that they have been undergoing so many prisons. So therefore, on the optimistic note, I would like to say that we should not be deterred from all these Indian designs, from the renewed Indian aggression. However, we need to be also cautious that if, God forbid, civil war erupts in Jammu and Kashmir, that is going to be detrimental for the innocent Kashmiris, because a lot of innocent people would be killed, as those have been killed in the past by the Indian security forces.
Definitely,
so we need
absolutely right, because that what the Indian design might be, because as you are mentioning, Dr. Awais, suddenly Indian occupation forces and its Godi media started projecting series of the so-called attacks in occupied territory and propagating well-designed episodes like military truck attack in Kathoa, bus attack in Riasi, then encounter in Doda, attacks on the security picket in Badarwa and others. While the same propagation was there by Indian External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Special Summit in Astana, Kazakhstan. What it all means, because there is a series of military actions which are now taking place in the occupied territory.
I think there seems to be method in madness if we see in the historical context. For example, that there were a number of incidents, violent incidents, terrorist incidents occurred in India. For example, Samjhauta Express and Makkah Masjid and other bombings, and later on investigations, they showed that Hindutva elements, they were involved into that.
Definitely, those were all pre-designed to have motives.
Okay. And earlier they started pointing fingers towards either to some organization in Bangladesh or towards Pakistan, but later on the investigation came up the findings which were quite contrary to their claims, number one. Secondly, in Kashmir that you have mentioned number of incidents, Pulwama incident is I think is a classic case in which their governor, he mentioned that incident
Yes.
in which some kind of laxity has been done to milk some political mileage. So if you see this incident and the other incident which has been happening in India by the patronage of BJP, I could say it. So I think that these incidents might be exploiting to have some international favor, which, as you have just mentioned in SCO organization, what J. Shankar said. And if you see their statement, his statement over there, I think that he talked about terrorism, and he didn't talk about.
He talked about cross-border
terrorism. He talked about the cross-border terrorism should be eliminated. So what about this, threat that guske marenge, that will hit you at your home?
Yes.
This is the statement coming from the higher echelons in
Yes,
India.
yes.
Okay.
And he has not made this
then the
statement
consistent
once.
threats against AJK and Gilgit-Baltistan, and then attack in violating international border in Pakistan, Balakot incident.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you see
your point well taken. Your point well taken. Shaikh sir, would you like to add something on that?
Yes, finally, despite this all, what is happening with the Kashmiris by the hands of the Indian government, I being the constituent of the APHC, APHC have a firm stand, are committed on the resolutions of the United Nations. We believe on a negotiation. APHC believe on mutual understanding. We believe on dialogue, and it is the responsibility of the United Nations, the member countries of the United Nations, those countries who have economic interests in the South Asian region. They should use their influence in decorating the negotiation table to resolve the long-standing issue of disputed Jammu and Kashmir.
Definitely, you are absolutely very right. Kashmiris are very friendly. They want peace. They want stability. Pakistan wants the same, but unfortunately, India don't want it, because this is the linchpin is basically Delhi. So, Dr. Waseem, when we are talking about India's, as Dr. Awais also pointed out, that India is very famous of playing dirty games like conducting false flag operations and state-sponsored terrorism in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, particularly like Pulwama, as Dr. Awais mentioned. Now, after fake military clashes with whatever going on right now in the occupied territory, so-called staged encounters, Indian government, including this external affairs minister statement and the media campaign going on, whether Modi regime is planning something to malign Kashmiri freedom movement, Pakistan, and to advance its nefarious designs?
I have absolutely no doubt. India has been doing it in the past, and India will continue to do the same in future as well. However, the world has now acknowledged the Indian outreach and Indian state-sponsored terrorism. We have seen in Canada, we have seen in the UK, we have seen in the Middle East, and we also seen in Pakistan. The world acknowledges how the India has been actually going across and then pursuing it, hard pursuit operations in the garb of terrorism. What we have to now be careful that we have to be proactive in our approach in actually negating the Indian nefarious designs. India is prepared. India has successfully done it in the past, but we can't actually afford again being embroiled in such a huge controversy. So what we have to do, use the diplomatic channels, use the military channels, and use our relationship with the great powers as well as with the regional countries, and tell them about the Indian designs. What I would rather also suggest through this program, that in the past 2 decades, we have seen a dehyphenation of India and Pakistan from the South Asian context. which was realized also by the United States, and they gave a press statement that this was a grave mistake by then. So it is about time that we have to work for rehyphenation of India and Pakistan, because unless we do that, the enduring success and enduring stability in South Asia and wider Kashmiri struggle might face
But Dr.
little more
Dr.
challenges.
Waseem, that would not be one-sided. You know that Pakistan is always willing to have some sort of engagement or having peace in the region, but unfortunately, India is not willing to have peace because they are always are the linchpin in that. So, in whole of such a scenario, very quickly, very brief. Where is the United Nations? Where is the international community? Where is the permanent five to resolve this Kashmir issue? As the Kashmiris are suffering, there is a genocide, war crimes, and atrocities going on in the occupied territory.
Unfortunately, what we have seen, the double standards of the United States, the EU countries, and the other global powers. While the United Nations Security Council resolutions are there, they have failed their implementation. What Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru had promised for the Kashmiris, that has not been done. But that doesn't mean that we have to just sit quiet and should just be watching from the sidelines. We have to do our part. We need to continue.
Right, we have run short of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Waseem, for being online. Thank you very much, Sheikh Abdul Majid Sahab. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you very much, Dr. Awais. As viewers, our panelists are very much eager to have, particularly that Pakistan has to make lots of efforts at the diplomatic front, because it is very important for Pakistan, for Kashmiris to raise voice internationally. Pakistan and China has to work together on Indian expansionist designs and whatever the nefarious designs India has. But right now the situation in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is that India actually intend to grab hold of the Kashmir. They intend to install a puppet government there. That's why Modi, during his visit in Kashmir, announced about the elections. 21% of the unemployment rate, unfortunately, in the occupied territory. There are atrocities, genocide, war crimes going on at the hands of Indian occupation forces. Kashmiri businesses are totally destroyed. Only as Sheikh Abdul Majid pointed out, that 8,000 crore of the Apple industry is actually ruined by the Indian occupied regime over there. And it's all planned, and India is following the footsteps of Israel, unfortunately, gradually moving and removing people from the land. And India wants to malign the freedom movement as well with its nefarious tactics within the occupied territory, unfortunately, and they are actually staging through media, through their judiciary, through their administration, through political statements and the statements at the international fora. So Pakistan has to go on with the proactive diplomacy, and this is the only solution. We have to strive hard to support Kashmiris, not only politically, morally, and diplomatically, but also we have to go ahead in that perspective, and internationally we have to gain support for the Kashmiris. This is very inevitable right now. This is today's Foresight. It's time to sign off. Allah Hafiz.